The unwanted princess, the twin moons of Aurelia, hung low over the shining palace. Their silver light touched the towers, making them look cold and lonely. Inside one of those towers sat Princess Lyra, staring out through a crystal window. The stars looked so close, yet she felt so far from everything. Once, she had been the jewel of the empire, graceful, loved, and promised to the most powerful prince in the galaxy. But that was before the accident. Before the day she lost the use of her legs, the palace had many whispers. Servants lowered their voices when she passed. "She is beautiful," they said, "but broken." In Verilian society, beauty and strength were everything. A ruler had to be perfect, unblemished. A princess who could not walk, she was seen as a shameful reminder of weakness. Her father, Emperor Keller, was a man of stone. His face rarely moved, except when he smiled at visiting dignitaries. For Lyra, his smile was gone years ago. He spoke to her only about duties, never about dreams. One evening, as the pale light of the moons filled her chamber, the emperor's chief advisor came to her door. He was tall, dressed in the black and gold of the imperial court. His long, pale fingers held a data tablet. "Your Highness," he said with a thin smile, "your father has decided your future." Lyra turned from the window. "My future?" she asked quietly. The advisor's eyes held no warmth. "You will marry a human." She blinked. "A human?" "Yes, from the planet Earth. A lesser world, but one our empire needs for trade. Roots, the alliance will be. Useful." Lyra felt her hands tighten on the arms of her chair. "And if I refuse?" His smile sharpened. "Refusal is not an option. The marriage contract is already signed. Your transport leaves tomorrow." Just like that, he was gone, leaving the faint scent of cold metal in the air. Lyra sat in silence for a long time. No alien noble wanted her. They saw her as damaged goods. And now they were sending her to some primitive man from a planet barely out of its own solar system. Was this her father's idea of kindness? Or was it just a way to remove her from the palace forever? The question burned inside her. Why so quickly? Why now? That night she tried to sleep, but her mind replayed fragments of the past. The explosion in the royal gardens, the flash of green fire, the smell of burnt leaves and blood, the pain that had crawled up her spine like cold lightning. The healers said it was an accident, but Lyra had always wondered if it had been something. Mordat morning came too soon. The palace was awake with the sound of preparations. Servants moved quickly, avoiding her gaze. They carried her cases down to the docking bay. She saw no friends, no family, not even her father. Only guards. Her transport ship was small, silver, and sharp like a blade. A single escort cruiser hovered nearby, silent and watchful dot as they rolled her chair up the ramp. Lyra looked back one last time at the palace towers. They seemed smaller now, almost afraid of the sky. Inside the ship, the air was cooler. She was given a small cabin with a bed, a desk, and a round window that showed nothing but stars. A tray of food waited for her, untouched. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she would meet this human, fulfill her duty, and live quietly far from the empire. But deep down, something twisted in her chest. A small, stubborn voice whispered, "This is not the end of your story." Hours later, the ship drifted in deep space. The engines hummed softly. Lyra sat by the window, her reflection pale against the black void. She thought about Earth. She had seen pictures, blue oceans, green forests, cities filled with light. It looked beautiful in a fragile way. Her eyes grew heavy. She might have drifted into sleep, if not for the faint beep from her desk. A message dot, it glowed on the small holoscreen. words forming in a language she didn't recognize, until the translation system flickered them into basic. Princess Lyra. They will kill you before the treaty is signed. Her breath caught. The sender was marked as unknown. The message had no return link, no signature, just those words. She stared at them for a long moment. Then, before she could even think, the screen went dark. The message was gone, erased as if it had never been there. Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. She turned her head toward the cabin door, half expecting it to open. But it stayed shut. Silent. She looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was the human she was supposed to marry. And somewhere, maybe closer than she thought, was the person who wanted her bed. She didn't know who to trust. She didn't know if she would even make it to her wedding. And for the first time in years, Princess Lyra felt something more. Than fear or sadness. She felt the cold spark of suspicion and the first stirrings of a fight. Asterisk, the human husband, the ship-carrying princess. Lyra reached the edge of human space after 6 days of silent travel. Her escort cruiser broke away without a word. No farewell, no message from the Emperor. Just cold emptiness. Through the round window of her cabin, Lyra saw the human world for the first time. It was nothing like the glittering alien cities of her home. Earth was blue, green, and strangely alive. Clouds moved in slow swirls. Sunlight glinted off oceans like liquid gold. For a moment, she forgot the palace, the whispers, the threat in the erased message. Then the docking clamps locked with a loud clang, and her heart sank again. He was waiting for her at the spaceport. Captain Daniel Ross, human, ex-soldier, traitor, the man she was supposed to marry. Lyra had imagined many things. A wide-eyed villager amazed by alien royalty, a soft diplomat with too many polite words. But the man before her was neither. Daniel stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders broad, eyes sharp and alert. His dark hair was messy, his uniform plain, but there was a steadiness in the way he watched her ship's ramp descend, as if he expected trouble to step off it. The moment he saw her chair, his jaw tightened. Not in pity, not in disgust, but in calculation. "Princess Lyra, I presume," he said. His voice was deep, edged with something dry, like sand under steel. She kept her own voice cool. "Captain Ross." There was no bow, no kneel. He simply nodded once, as if greeting an equal, or a stranger he didn't trust yet. A government official from Earth handed him a digital tablet. "Marriage confirmation. You'll both sign here." Lyra stared at the glowing text. No courtship, no ceremony, just a contract. A trade. Her name was already printed at the bottom, next to his. She hadn't even held the pen yet. She signed. He signed. That was it. The official smiled as if a great romance had just been sealed, then walked away. Daniel led her toward his ship. "Hope you don't mind small quarters," he said without looking back. "My freighter isn't exactly a palace." "I don't need a palace," she replied. "That's good," he said. "Because mine smells like engine oil and bad coffee." Lyra almost smiled, but the air around him was too tense. His eyes flicked toward every shadow, every passerby. Inside his freighter, the air was warmer, humming with machinery. The walls were lined with tools, crates, and a few worn photographs taped above the controls. The smell of metal and old leather filled the narrow halls. "This is the Greyhound," he said. "Fast enough to outrun trouble, most of the time." She noticed it quickly. The word trouble. It wasn't said casually. It was said like a man who'd met trouble many times, and usually survived it. As they moved toward the passenger quarters, Lyra's eyes caught something strange. A faint, pulsing red light in the corner of the main console. Daniel noticed her glance. "Ship logs," he said too quickly. Just system checks. But later, when she was alone in her small cabin, she heard him talking in the cockpit. His voice was low, urgent. She couldn't hear the words, only the tone, clipped and tense. When she opened the door quietly, a voice stopped. The next morning, over a simple breakfast, Daniel surprised her. "I found something in your luggage," he said, not looking up from his coffee. Her fingers froze on the cup. "What, exactly?" He slid a small, square device across the table. Its surface was smooth and silver, covered in alien symbols. "I thought it was a power cell," he said, "until it started transmitting." Her stomach tightened. "It sent an encrypted burst to somewhere in Varelian space," he continued. "But before I could trace it, the signal cut. Whoever's on the other end knows where you are now." Lyra swallowed. She wanted to tell him about the erased message on her ship, but her instincts told her to wait. Daniel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You have enemies, Princess. I don't know why, but they just became our problem." That day, they left Earth's orbit. Destination: a neutral space station halfway to the outer colonies. Daniel claimed it was safer than staying on Earth. Lyra wasn't sure she believed him. In the quiet hours of travel, she studied him when he wasn't looking. He moved like a soldier, even in the cramped corridors. Every sound made his hand twitch toward the weapon at his belt. That night, she woke to the sound of alarms. Daniel's voice came over the comms. "We've got company." Through her window, she saw them. 3 black ships, sleek and predatory, sliding out from the shadows of an asteroid field. No insignia, no lights, and something in her blood went cold. She knew those ships. She had seen them once before. The night of the explosion in the Royal Gardens. Asterisk the message. The 3 black ships did not answer Daniel's hails. They just moved closer, silent as predators in deep water. On his freighter's sensors, they showed as faint blurs. No ID tags. No signatures. Only the soft, steady ping of their engines, growing louder with every second. Daniel's jaw tightened as he steered the Greyhound between 2 drifting asteroids. "They're not here to talk," he muttered. Lyra, strapped into the co-pilot's seat, kept her voice steady. "You know them?" He didn't answer, right? Away. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "You do," she pressed. "I've seen that design before," he said finally. "Years back, during a border skirmish. Those ships don't take prisoners. They came faster now." The lead vessel's nose glowed faintly, charging a weapon. Daniel yanked the controls, sending the Greyhound into a dive. The stars tilted, and the asteroids became walls of rock rushing past at terrifying speed. Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. She remembered the last time she'd seen ships like this, hanging in the sky above the Royal Gardens, their weapons hidden until the first blast tore through the air. The day her legs stopped working, she gripped the arms of her chair. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Captain, those ships are Varelian." Daniel glanced at her. "Your people?" "No," she said. "Not my people. My family's enemies. They—" Greyhound darted through a narrow asteroid gap, but the black ships followed effortlessly. Daniel's hands moved fast over the controls, switching power from secondary systems to the rear shields. "Tell me exactly why they're after you," he said. She hesitated. The words she wanted to say were heavy, tangled with years of suspicion and fear. "Before the accident, I discovered something. A network of corruption, illegal deals, weapons sales to outlaw fleets. I told the council. The next day, I was in the garden when the attack came." "You think this is connected?" he asked. "I know it is." A sharp alarm filled the cockpit, an incoming signal. Daniel tapped. The console and a small holoscreen flickered to life. The image was blurred, the voice distorted. Princess Lyra, you should have stayed in the palace. Now you will vanish among the stars, and no one will remember your name." The signal cut. Daniel swore under his breath. Friendly bunch. But Lyra was staring at the console, her mind racing. The voice was altered, but there was something in the rhythm of the words. A familiarity she couldn't place. The first shot came without warning. A beam of green light slammed into the Greyhound's rear shields, making the ship shudder violently. Sparks danced along the control panel. Lyra's hands flew to the edge of her seat, steadying herself. "Hold on," Daniel growled. He dove the ship toward a cluster of rotating asteroids. The Greyhound's hull scraped dangerously close to jagged rock, but it gave them cover. The black ships fired again, each blast lighting the asteroid shadows in eerie flashes. Lyra's mind worked quickly. "If we can disrupt their targeting systems—" "Already ahead of you," Daniel said, flipping a row of switches. Panels. On the Greyhound's sides unfolded, releasing a spray of reflective chaff into the void. It shimmered like stardust, scattering sensor signals. The next enemy shot went wide, slicing a chunk off an asteroid instead. But the victory was brief. Two of the ships split off, moving to flank them. The third hung back, like a wolf waiting for the kill. Lyra's gaze shifted to the nav display. Her knowledge of Verillian ship patterns was something Daniel didn't have. "They'll try to force us into open space. That's where their long-range cannons work best," Daniel smirked faintly. "Not if we change the rules." He swung the Greyhound hard left, heading straight into a dense asteroid cluster that no sane pilot would enter at speed. Lyra's stomach dropped as rocks spun past, close enough to scrape the paint from the hull. The pursuing ships hesitated. Just for a second. That second was all Daniel needed. "Hang on, Princess," he said. He cut power to the main thrusters, letting the ship drift into the shadow of a massive asteroid. The enemy scanners swept right past them, fooled by the interference of the rock dot in the sudden quiet. Lyra's breathing slowed. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the sensor feed. "They'll realize in about 30 seconds we're not in open space. Then they'll double back." Lyra looked at him. "And when they do?" He gave her a thin smile. "We make it expensive." In those 30 seconds of stillness, Lyra felt something unexpected. Not safety, not yet, but a fragile thread of trust forming between them. This human wasn't just ferrying her like cargo. He was planning, adapting, thinking 2 moves ahead. The comm unit gave a faint crackle. A new message blinked onto the screen. This one different, unencrypted, no voice distortion. Just plain text: "They're not here to kill you yet. They want you alive for the trial." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Trial? What trial?" Daniel read it over her shoulder, frowning. "Looks like someone in your empire's got a plan for you, Princess. And it's not a happy ending." Outside, the shadows moved. The black ships were coming back. Asterisk first attack, the shadows around the massive asteroid came alive. First came the low, like the growl of something too big to see. Then the glint of metal, the slow tilt of wings catching distant starlight. The black ships were back. Daniel's hands moved fast over the controls. "Brace yourself, Princess." "They're done playing." Lyra's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. She remembered that hum. She had heard it in the royal garden seconds before the green light burned through the sky. "They'll box us in," she said. "Not if I turn the box inside out." Daniel muttered. The first volley hit like a hammer. A green beam smashed into the Greyhound's forward shields, lighting the cockpit in a sick glow. The ship shuddered violently, a deep groan echoing through the hull. Panels rattled. A loose tool clanged somewhere in the corridor. Daniel's eyes didn't leave the nav screen. Shields at 60%. Not good. Another blast. This one slicing across the port side, leaving a long glowing scar on the hull. Warning lights flared red. "They're trying to hurt us," Daniel said. "Push us toward open space." Lyra's voice was sharp. "And if they do? They'll tear us apart from a safe distance." She leaned forward, studying the tactical readout. Her mind raced back to Varelian ship design. Every vent, every weak point. Her voice was quick and clear. "Those ships run hot. Their vent ports are under the starboard wing. A plasma surge there will overload their side shields." Daniel shot her a sideways glance. "You're talking sabotage in the middle of a firefight?" "I'm talking survival." For a heartbeat, the cockpit was silent, but for the alarms. Then Daniel gave a small grin, the grin of a soldier who'd just seen a crazy plan that might work. "All right, Princess," he said, "let's give them a nosebleed." The Greyhound swung hard around a chunk of spinning rock, then roared straight toward the lead black ship. Lyra's stomach lurched. The enemy vessel grew in the viewport until it filled her vision, sleek and deadly. Its forward guns began to glow. Daniel didn't flinch. At the last second, he rolled the ship, skimming just beneath the enemy's wing. The vent port flashed past in a blur. Lyra's fingers flew over the auxiliary controls Daniel had routed to her console. She locked a small EMP mine to the magnetic launcher and fired. The device shot out, clamping onto the vent port with a metallic thunk. A second later, the mine went off, a pulse of white light spreading across the black hull. The ship's starboard shields flared, then collapsed. Daniel didn't waste a second. He swung the Greyhound behind the now vulnerable wing and fired the forward cannons. Twin bolts of blue light punched straight into the exposed plating. The enemy ship shuddered, spun, and began to drift, its engines sputtering. "Nice aim," Daniel said. Lyra's voice was calm, but her eyes gleamed. "I told you. I know their weaknesses." The victory was short-lived. The other two ships closed in, one from above, one from below. Beams crossed over the Greyhound, the air inside filling with the scent of burnt ozone. The next hit was brutal. It slammed into the starboard shields with enough force to throw Lyra sideways in her harness. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, something heavy broke free and crashed to the floor. Daniel's voice was tight. "Shields down to 30%. We can't take much more." Lyra scanned the asteroid field outside. Her mind worked like a puzzle engine, assembling angles and timing. She spotted it, a narrow crack in the largest asteroid, just wide enough for the Greyhound to fit through. "There," she said, pointing. "Hide in the fracture. When they pass, hit them from behind." Daniel's mouth twitched. "You sure? You weren't a fighter pilot before you became royalty?" She didn't answer. The Greyhound dove for the crack, scraping close enough that chunks of rock spun away from the hull. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Only the faint glow of the consoles lit their faces. The enemy ships swept past, sensors sweeping the wrong sector. Daniel counted under his breath. 3, 2, 1. He hit the thrusters, launching the Greyhound out of the crack like a bullet. They came up directly behind the lower enemy ship. Daniel's cannons lit up, tearing through its aft engines. The vessel spun helplessly, colliding with an asteroid in a shower of sparks. Only one enemy remained. The biggest of the 3. It turned slowly toward them, its forward guns glowing brighter and brighter. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "That's a capital-grade cannon. One hit and we're vapor." Daniel's voice was steady. "Then we won't let them take the shot." He pushed the engines to their limit, charging straight toward the massive barrel. The enemy ship, confident in its size, didn't evade at the last second. Daniel veered upward, releasing a cluster of magnetic charges. They clung to the cannon's housing. The explosion was silent in space, but the flash lit up the cockpit, the big ship's main weapon. Went dark, its power grid flickering. Daniel pulled the Greyhound away, breathing hard. That's enough for today. They'll think twice before coming at us again. Lyra looked at the drifting enemy ships on the screen. No, she said quietly. They'll come back. And next time, they won't just be 3. Daniel met her eyes. Then we make sure we're ready. In that moment, the line between passenger and partner blurred. Asterisk, the hidden enemy. The asteroid field was far behind them now, but the Greyhound still carried the echo of battle. A faint hum in the hull, the acrid scent of burnt circuitry. Scratches. In the deck, from where loose cargo had slammed around, Daniel moved through the ship like a mechanic in a war zone, patching power lines, replacing cracked panels, tightening bolts that might rattle loose if they jumped to hyperspeed again. Sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching the stars drift past. It looked peaceful now, but she knew peace was only a disguise. All right, Daniel said at last, dropping into the pilot's chair. We've got enough juice to make it to a refuel station. After that, we need a plan. Lyra's eyes stayed on the stars. A plan. Won't matter if we don't know who's behind them. Daniel turned to face her fully. You said you had enemies in your own court. Names, Princess. I need names. She hesitated. Virelian politics were a nest of knives. Every name she spoke could be a friend, or an enemy pretending to be one. But after the black ships, after the message, after the attack, she had no choice. It began 3 years ago, she said slowly. I found records hidden in the Imperial data vaults, shipments of restricted weapons sent to outlaw fleets. In the outer ring, they were signed with the seal of the Council of 12. Daniel frowned. Council of 12? Our empire's highest governing body. Advisors to the Emperor. Each one powerful enough to move fleets with a single command. And you told them? Daniel asked. I did, she said. The next day, I was in the gardens. There was an explosion. My guards died. I lived. But I never walked again. And every trace of those records vanished from the vaults. Daniel's gaze was steady, but his jaw tightened. So someone on that council wanted you silent. She gave a small, humorless laugh. On the council, everyone wants someone else silenced. That's how they survive. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. Then the question is, who benefits from you being shipped off to a human backwater? Lyra looked down at her hands. If I die here, far from Betrayal, it will be seen as an unfortunate accident in dangerous space. No investigation, no scandal. The council stays. Clean. Daniel sat back, silent for a moment. His mind worked in a soldier's way, breaking the problem into enemy, objective, method. They're not just trying to kill you, he said finally. They're trying to erase you. The COM system beeped. Daniel tapped the console, but the incoming message wasn't audio. It was video. A grainy image flickered into view. It was a man, tall, robed in imperial silver, his face partly hidden in shadow. His voice was calm, almost bored. Princess Lyra, you disappoint us. You could have lived quietly. Now you run with a human mercenary and spill dangerous truths. Lyra's pulse hammered. She recognized the voice. Counselor Varric, one of her father's most trusted advisors. Daniel's hand hovered over the controls to cut the feed, but Lyra shook her head. Let him talk. Varric's eyes glinted. You cannot win. Every port is close to you. Every fleet in this sector knows your ship's signature. There is only one path left. Return to the palace and answer for your crimes. Daniel's voice was sharp. Crimes? What crimes? Varric's smile was cold. Treason, theft, conspiracy to aid enemies of the Empire. The trial will be public. the sentence permanent. The screen went black. The cockpit was silent for a moment, except for the low hum of the engine's dot. Then Daniel spoke. "They're building a case. They'll make the galaxy believe you're the villain." Lyra's gaze hardened. "They'll make the galaxy believe whatever they want, unless we stop them." Daniel studied her. The calm royal mask she'd worn since they met was cracking, and beneath it was something sharper. "You're not thinking of running anymore," he said. "No," she replied. "I'm thinking of fighting, but we can't do it alone." Daniel leaned back in his chair, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "You know, humans have a saying, when the odds are impossible, it's the perfect time to start." Lyra almost smiled. "And how do humans fight impossible odds?" He reached up and flipped a switch on the console. A holographic map of the sector appeared, glowing blue. "We find allies the Empire doesn't know we have. Smugglers, mercs, old war friends. People who don't like being told who they can't fight." Leora's voice was quiet, but certain. "Then we start." There, in the cold dark between the stars, the Greyhound turned toward a new course. Far ahead, hidden in the maze of uncharted space, waited the first of those allies, and the next step in a fight that could bring down the Council itself. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew the truth. They had just declared war on the Empire. Asterisk humans are different. The Greyhound slipped into the shadows of uncharted space. Here, no trade lanes glowed on the nav map. No patrols drifted lazily between stations. It was the kind of place where even the stars felt sharper. As if watching closely, Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, one boot hooked lazily on the console, eyes half on the scanner and half on a small screen in his hand. He wasn't reading any official charts. Instead, he scrolled through something that looked like a mess of coded graffiti. Lyra glanced at it. "That's not an Imperial star map." "Nope," Daniel said. "It's the Black Thread, the—" "What?" "A human pirate network," he said casually, as if discussing a bakery menu. "Old habit from my service days. I learned that if you want the truth, you don't ask governments. You ask the people they're scared of." Lyra frowned. "Pirates? Smugglers? You think they'll help a princess of the Empire?" Daniel's grin was quick and sharp. "No, I think they'll help someone who can pay and make life miserable. For their enemies. You just happen to be both." She wasn't sure whether to feel insulted or impressed. He scrolled past flashing symbols and strange coding names. Cold Dust, Lu Fang, No Moon Run. Lyra recognized none of them. Daniel tapped one and opened a cum channel. "Let's see if an old friend still owes me a drink." The contact who answered was a woman with a cybernetic jaw and eyes that glowed faint green. "Ross," she said in a voice that sounded like steel on stone. "I thought you were dead." "Only on the inside," Daniel said smoothly. "Need a favor." The woman's gaze slid toward Lyra. "And who's the royal decoration?" Lyra's chin lifted. "Princess Lyra of the Varelian Empire." The woman's laugh was short and cold. "And you brought her here? Brave or stupid?" Daniel shrugged. "Little of both." Within the hour, they met the woman, name Mara Jex, at a drifting station hidden in the rings of a shattered moon. It was a maze of welded scrap metal, flickering lights, and the smell of oil and ozone. Every corridor was watched by eyes that judged strangers in a single glance. "This," Daniel said to Lyra as they walked, "is where humans get creative." Mara led them into a small room cluttered with screens. On one wall was a map, not of planets, but of information. Names, codes, shipping routes. Every piece stolen, hacked, or overheard. Lyra studied it, her pulse quickening. "You're tracking Imperial fleet movements." Mara smirked. "Sweetheart, we're tracking everything. And we know your council's been busy sending kill orders." Daniel leaned over the table. We need proof. Something that shows they're arming outlaw fleets. Something that will burn them down in the public eye. Mara tapped the side of her cybernetic jaw. I might have it, but it's locked in a relay hub on Kessler Station. High security, Imperial coded. Lyra's instinct was to think of official channels, authorizations, clearances, protocol. That's impossible to reach without. Daniel cut her off. Without asking. Yeah, that's why it'll work. Lyra gave him a puzzled look. You can't just walk into a secure Imperial relay. Of course not, Daniel said. That's why we crawl into it. He outlined the plan with the calm certainty of someone who'd done the impossible more than once. They'd disguised the Greyhound as a decommissioned ore hauler, drifted into the station's shadow, and slip a small boarding pod into an unused service hatch. From there, they'd bypass the official corridors entirely and snake through the maintenance guts of the station. Mara listened, eyes narrowing. That's insane, which means it'll probably work. That night, while Mara's crew modified the ship, Lyra watched Daniel work at the nav table. His fingers moved with an easy rhythm, laying out approach vectors and timing windows down to the second. You make it sound simple, she said. It's never simple, he replied. But it's always possible. She tilted her head. Humans don't seem to believe in impossible. Daniel glanced at her. That's because we've been the underdog for most of our history. We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we're stubborn enough to try one more time. After we fail. The next day, they made the run to Kessler Station. The Greyhound drifted in under minimal power, her transponder broadcasting a false identity Mara had forged in less than an hour. From the cockpit, Lyra saw the massive Imperial relay hub, a fortress of steel, bristling with antennas and guarded. Docking arms. Daniel's voice was steady. This is where it gets tricky. The boarding pod detached, silent as a shadow. Inside it, Daniel checked his gear. A compact rifle, a portable signal jammer, and a worn combat knife strapped to his boot. Lyra noticed his eyes. They weren't reckless, just focused. She realized she was watching a soldier in his element. Hours later, Daniel was back on the Greyhound with a data drive in his hand. He dropped it on the table between them. This, he said, is every shipment, every illegal deal, every dirty credit the Council has pushed through that relay in the last year. Lyra stared at the drive. It wasn't just proof. It was a weapon. Mara whistled low. You've officially made yourself the most wanted human in Imperial space, Ross. Daniel smirked. Wouldn't be the first time. Lyra looked at him differently now. She had known humans were resourceful. But Daniel was something else. He didn't follow rules. He rewrote them. He didn't just survive against impossible odds, he made the odds irrelevant. For the first time since leading Betrayal, Lyra felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to hope for. They might actually win. Asterisk the choice. The Greyhound was quiet. Too quiet, Dot. It wasn't the peace of safety. It was the stillness before a storm. On the nav table, the data drive lay like a shard of glass. Inside it was enough truth to shake the Varelian Empire from the throne to the gutters. Illegal arms sales, names, dates, transaction codes, even secure communications from Counselor Varek himself. Lyra stared at it. One small object. One massive. Decision. Daniel stood at the cockpit window, looking out at the swirl of a nearby nebula. Its purple and blue light danced across his face, but his eyes were far away, calculating, measuring risks. They'll kill us for this, he said flatly. Lyra didn't look up. They're already trying to kill us. He turned, leaning against the console. That's the easy part. The hard part is what happens if we actually win. She knew what he meant. If they exposed the Council, the Empire would be thrown into chaos. Fleets might split. Governors might seize power. Civil war could tear through the core worlds. Millions would suffer. Sometimes the truth is more dangerous than the lie, she said quietly. Daniel's answer was simple. And sometimes the lie eats everything if you let it live. For a long moment, neither spoke. The decision was interrupted by a sharp electronic tone. The COM screen lit up with a priority channel, Imperial frequency. Daniel's hand hovered over the accept button. Don't, Lyra warned. It's a trap. I know, he said. But I want to hear what the trap sounds like. He tapped the control. The image of Counselor Varek filled the screen. His face was smooth, calm, and smiling. Princess Lyra, I offer you mercy. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Mercy from a man who sent killers after me? Varek spread his hands. I offer you a path home. Destroy the stolen data, and I will guarantee your safety. Your human friend will be allowed to live. You will resume your duties. At the palace. No trial, no charges. And if I refuse? She asked. His smile thinned. Then you will be hunted until there is nothing left of you, and your human will be the first to die. When the screen went dark, Daniel didn't move. Well, he said, that's flattering. Lyra turned to him. You know he's lying. Of course, Daniel said. But he just told us he's scared. That means this drive is our best weapon. Her voice was steady now. Then we use it. The plan was dangerous, almost suicidal. They would slip into the Imperial core on. A false diplomatic signal. A trick Daniel had learned from a pirate, blockade runner, and broadcast the contents of the drive across every public channel in the Empire. Once the data was out, no one could bury it. Every citizen, every rival faction, every foreign power would see the truth. Marajex's crew helped rig the Greyhound for the run. Extra shielding, hidden arrays. Emergency thrusters for a fast exit, if there was one. The day of the run. Lyra dressed not in royal silks, but in a plain dark jacket. She looked less like a princess, more like a commander heading into battle. Daniel strapped into the pilot's chair, eyes locked on the hyperspace countdown. Once we start, there's no stopping, he said. Lyra met his gaze. Then don't. Stop. They came out of hyperspace in the heart of the core worlds. Instantly, alarms screamed. Patrol ships locked on, broadcasting orders to surrender. Daniel ignored them. Hold steady, he muttered, hands flying over the controls. Lyra slid the data drive into the broadcast console. Her fingers danced over the interface, decrypting files, unlocking evidence. The ship's array began to glow as it powered. Up 3 minutes, she said at the first volley hit. The Greyhound's shields flared blue. Daniel threw the ship into a sharp dive, weaving between the towers of an orbital station. Patrol ships gave chase, green bolts cutting through the black. Each shot rattled the Greyhound's hull like a drumbeat. 2 minutes, Lyra called. Daniel grinned grimly. Plenty of time. A missile streaked past, exploding so close it shook the cabin. Mara's voice came over the comm from her own ship, flying interference. Move, Ross. I can't hold them forever. Daniel slammed the throttle forward. The Greyhound burst into open space again, climbing toward the central relay station, the one place no Imperial could ignore. Lyra's voice was calm, but inside she felt the fire of every choice, every loss that had brought her here. 1 minute. Daniel gave a low whistle. Guess we're both making history today. He angled the Greyhound directly above the relay's transmission dish. Lyra's hand hovered over the final control. Do it, Daniel said. She pressed it. Across the Empire, holoscreens lit up. In markets, in military barracks, in the grand hall of the Imperial Palace, every display flickered to the same feed. Varek's secret messages, the Council's orders. Shipments of weapons to outlaw fleets. Names. Faces. Proof. The Empire saw its own corruption in the light of day. The patrol ships broke formation. Some turned their weapons away. Others began transmitting the broadcast further, as if eager to see the council burn. In the palace, Lyra's father, the Emperor, stood frozen as his court erupted in shouts. Back on the Greyhound, Lyra looked at Daniel. "There's no going back," he smiled faintly. "Who wants to go back?" Marat's voice cut in. "You've just started a civil war, Princess." Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "No, we've started a chance for something better." The Greyhound turned, engines flaring, vanishing into the black. Behind them, the galaxy was no longer the same. And for the first time in her life, Lyra knew this truth. She hadn't been married off to a human by fate. She had been given an ally who could change the impossible.